And apparently a lot of Americans are feeling their financial mojo, holidays notwithstanding here. A lot of that has to do with growing optimism. Whatever comes out of the Trump White House is going to continue to be good for the economy. Let's pick it apart with Kelly Jane Torrance, the Weekly Standard Deputy Managing Editor, Diane Furchtgott-Roth, the former Reagan economic advisor, and last but certainly not least, Atima Omara, of course, the former Young Democrats of America president. Atima, what do you make of these stats that seem to show that Americans are increasingly confident in the economy and feeling that things will get better still? It doesn't quite cut equally among Democrats and Republicans, but there has been a surge for both. What do you make of that?
Yes, I think it's definitely, the economy has been shifting in the right direction. That is obviously to credit of some of Obama's work in the last 8 years, taking unemployment rate from 10.9 to a little under 4.9% currently. But you know, if you're definitely an investor, if you're definitely you have a large business, you're definitely looking forward to a Trump presidency and easing up of economic regulations. The big question will be, and this is what differentiates Democrats from Republicans, is whether some of those tax cuts will be also for small business and middle class people to get the economy continuing growing.
But it sounds like you have your doubts as to whether any of this has anything to do with Donald Trump.
Well, it is early. So he did have an executive order. I think it was to sort of do some of the deregulation on the Dodd-Frank Act, which is bipartisan.
So all the other talk about tax cuts and regulatory relief, none of that's coming into play here?
I think some of it is, but it's still early, yes, and like most of that has to be congressional actions, which I think they're still working on.
All right.
So.
But you're coming closer to actually liking the president, I think. I think that's starting. All right.
I wouldn't go that far.
I'm joking. All right. Kelly Jane, what do you make of this? Because obviously there's been a smart run up here. It slowed a little bit since the inauguration, but again, this is one of the best opening months that we've seen in the markets in quite some time, and growing optimism that, you know, this administration is going to deliver. Is that putting too much pressure on the guy right now? Because the markets have really not factored in anything less than perfection here.
Well, I think we could use a little bit of pressure on him. No, you're right, Neil. You know, as the S&P 500 is up 10% since the election, consumer confidence is the highest it's been in a decade. And this is all on the idea that he is going to deregulate, tax reform is going to happen. But, you know, I think he could use a little pressure to talk about this stuff more. You know, he had that big press conference last week, and he seems like he is still locked in the past, talking about his electoral victories in different demographic groups, instead of moving forward and saying, this is what I'm doing as president, this is what is going to happen, and this is how it's going to help the economy. You know, he really seems stuck. He wants people to remember what a great accomplishment it was that he won the presidency. Well, okay, that's over. Now do some of what you promised in terms of helping the economy and bringing jobs back to America.
All right. Well, you can do both. You can still brag about the election and do the other stuff. We'll see what happens there. But, you know, Diana, I'm wondering, and I'll get into this more with my buddy Charlie Gasparino about the tax cut issue, because Republicans are a little divided in exactly how they're going to proceed from here. The talk is they're going to be big tax cuts. Talk is that it's going to be in a matter of weeks before the plan is laid out, and that they're going to get this together fast. But if they don't have a way of paying for it, among some in the party, it's going to be a problem. Do you think that will be a problem?
Well, the stock market's been rising because of expectations of lower taxes, especially the lower corporate tax rate, which now is at 39%, that Paul Ryan wants to bring down to 20% and Donald Trump wants to bring down to 15%. So expectations about the future are very important. Americans are already richer because of the run-up in the stock market. This is called the wealth effect. Retail sales increased dramatically last month, and people feel good about it. And everybody knows that with the corporate tax rate being reduced, investment is going to come back into the country, and businesses are going to be investing and creating more jobs. That's why the stock market has gone up. And Donald Trump is right on to be promoting rolling back taxes and rolling back regulations. That's what's making the stock market go up.
All right. Now, I know when you look at all of this stuff, you know, part of the stuff that comes up is that this is a continuation of the Obama rally on that the underlying economy
Well,
is
no,
sound.
the rally started right after the election. The rally
I know
started right after the election.
Believe me, I'm not here to sort of play politics with it. But Atima, all I want to know is when those tax cuts come into being. The question, I think, is just a matter of when, not if. Now, they might not be as generous as was headlined, but they're coming. That is really the last means by which you can goose this economy, and it's been a tepid recovery.
Well, there's also rolling back regulations.
I understand, but I'm going to go to Atima on this one, and this notion that that's all we have in our arsenal to boost this, tax cuts. Would you agree with that?
No, not at all.
I don't
Atima
think
first?
it's
Go ahead.
I don't think that it's actually the only thing that could boost it. I think there's other things that could be done, certainly working on small business tax credits, you know, middle-class tax cuts.
I don't know any small business person who says, thank God for that tax credit. Right?
Well, I think more money in their pockets because they're operating on a shorter budget than, let's say, a guy
dumb.
like...
I mean, I'm not saying you're dumb. I'm just saying that these credits, seriously, I just think that just to cut in their rates avoids the sort of debate about this rather than a credit that could come or go, right?
Right. Well, I think that the big thing for them is making sure that they have a lot of flexibility to do their work. And so I think that's why also making sure that this trickles down to folks who actually have smaller businesses and the dime doesn't go as far as it would if you're running a bigger corporation is definitely key.
Yeah.
I mean, from a Democratic perspective, I mean, obviously working on maintaining wages and raising those wages, certainly the minimum wage is certainly one of the things that we advocate for. I know Trump has kind of gone back and forth a little bit on that. So, I mean, I think it's not just about the tax cuts. I think there's other ways to bring that economy resurging.
Kelly Jane, what is the one thing that might dissipate a little bit, but that you don't want to see compromised at all? In other words, we can always argue about the final rate, what it'll be, and maybe it won't be as dramatic as some had hoped. But if there's a do or die event, a tax cut event that you want to see, or that you hear Republicans, or even for that matter, the extended markets want to see, what would it be?
You know, they're really debating on how to do corporate tax reform. Do we want the border adjustment tax? Do we not? But really, you've got.
I don't think that's going anywhere.
No, and the rate, you have to cut the rate. I mean, when Canada has a much lower corporate tax rate than the United States, you know you have a problem. So, you know, credits here and there, how you're going to do it, border adjustment, not. The bottom line, get it to a good rate. But you could live without
that border. In other words, if that doesn't come to fruition, and it looks unlikely it will, you could live with that?
I could. You know, it's something that I think he's having trouble communicating that to the people, too. I mean, there's, you know, reporters can't even get it straight. So I think trying to sell that to the American people when, you know...
Reporters having a problem with meth.
Well, you know, the White House people aren't helping in that, regard.
What do you think of that if this thing doesn't come to pass, the border, which was presumably going to be one of the means by which we paid for these cuts, Republicans are in trouble. Do you buy that?
No, not at all. Also, border adjustability is not that complicated. You don't get a deduction for your import, and you don't get taxed on your export. This would be very beneficial for economic growth because companies would have an incentive to purchase things made in America rather than having some Buy America regulation.
Well, you better tell that to Walmart and all these others who are worrying about that, but you could be right, we'll see.
But if we're talking about boosting the economy, rolling back regulations is costless, and it will do a tremendous amount. Small businesses have said that these unpredictable regulations are more costly to them than the taxes that they pay, which are predictable.
All right. Ladies, I want to thank you all.